So it was a complete turnaround. Now, later on, we wanted to get back to the live thing. And when we made that ill-fated, or that's another way of putting it, the unhappiest record that we made was Let It Be. And I thought it was the end of our lives together, but it wasn't. We went on and we came back and we made Abbey Road, which was a very happy and lovely recording. But Let It Be had some great songs on it, and it was originally a very sort of honest, let it all hang out kind of record. But what we were trying to do with that was to make a live recording. And the original idea was, I thought it was a very good one, it was never achieved. Let the boys write a whole album of new songs, which we shall get ready in the studio, rehearse, get it all together, then put on a show with an audience and do a live performance of new material, which we shall record, and that will be the album. That was the intention with Let It Be, and it didn't happen. And the only live thing that came out of that was them singing on top of Savile Row before the police broke in.
Thank you. I've lost track where the mic is. Oh, gentleman here. Yeah, we've got room now for 2 more questions only, I'm afraid, so one more after this one.
Yeah, Tim Cooper from the Evening Standard for Rupert Perry. This may be a unique album launch in that no copies of the album are available and none of the performers are present. Could you tell us where the 3 remaining Beatles are today and what they're doing that prevents them being here, if possible?
All I can tell you is what I said at the beginning. I understand that George Harrison and Ringo Starr are overseas, and I don't know where Paul is, but as I said, I got a letter from him this morning to read out to you, which is what I did at the start.
I do know George Harrison is in Australia. And I think the last question is from the gentleman at the back.
Hi, Bernard from a Belgian newspaper. There's been referred to the Hamburg days of the Beatles here several times. Last year there was a movie, marvelous movie made about the life of the 5th Beatles, Stuart Sutcliffe, called Backbeat, which had a brilliant soundtrack produced by Don Was. Don't you people think that that kind of thing was more relevant in our days than releasing the BBC stuff now? And that it was maybe more true to the real spirit of the Beatles in those early days?
But it wasn't the Beatles, was it?
It weren't Beatles, no.
That's a contentious question to end with. Anyone want to take that one?
I don't really understand it. You know, that was somebody recreating what they thought the Beatles sounded like in the Star Club. This is what the Beatles sounded like in the Star Club, this album. But it's, you know, recorded maybe just a year after they'd finished performing there, sometimes less, maybe a few months after they'd stopped playing at the Star Club. You're getting the Beatles as they sounded in the Star Club without, you know, plates smashing over people's heads and things like that, or, you know, without it being recorded on a terrible tape recorder at the back of the club, as there was a Star Club release in the late 70s. But this is pristine quality Beatles rocking out on Chuck Berry songs and Little Richard songs. So it is the spirit of the Beatles, and it is the Beatles. So I don't understand.
It was the audience that created the atmosphere, right?
Well, I think if you take a listen, I know perhaps you haven't heard this material, but you know, if you listen to John Lennon doing Sweet Little 16, or Paul McCartney doing Ooh My Soul or Lucille, you can see the energy's there and the spirit's there. And this will later rest forever, all those murmurings about the Beatles not being a good live group, because they were a terrific live group when you listen to this material. And maybe the other thing that you should remember is that this album is just great fun. I think perhaps we were in danger of being a bit too serious about it. There's a lot of great chat on this album, and maybe it's a time to also say that they did their own radio series for 15 weeks and worked with presenters Lee Peters and Rodney Burke, who are not sitting on the panel here, because nobody knows where they are. So if they happen to hear anything about this, Lee Peters or Rodney Burke, step forward, because you're on this album and you're joshing around with the Beatles, and it's very funny, and we'd like to know where you are.
Also, part of your question related to the atmosphere created by an audience at a Beatles gig. And having been, I don't know how many people here have actually been at some mega gig like the Shea Stadium. I was fortunate enough to be there with them, and I can only tell you that you couldn't hear a thing. They, which takes up a point that George made, couldn't hear each other. I interviewed them immediately after that gig, and John Lennon said, I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't hear Paul, I couldn't hear so-and-so, so-and-so. I mean, so from a performance point of view, it wasn't made by the atmosphere, it was marred by the atmosphere, and you, I'm sure, wouldn't want to hear that on record. If you were actually there then the performance itself was visually exciting, and who knows what it sounded like, because nobody heard it.
Alan, a last word? Would you like to have a last word? Because
Well, no,
we haven't heard from you for so
actually,
long.
I'm quite fascinated by all this. I think the interest is quite amazing. I'm a little surprised at some of the questions, and I don't understand why everybody is getting terribly serious about it all. It's a very good album. It takes us all back to the 1960s, and that we're still here and enjoying it all is something that I think we should just keep in our hearts.
Thank you. Alan, I knew I could rely on you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I know there were a lot more people wanting to ask questions. These things usually start slowly and build to a crescendo. Could I just let you know that there is a press pack on the way out, which does include a sample CD with 6 tracks in, and the album is released on November the 30th. And I hope you'll join with me in thanking very much our panel for coming today. Thank you very much.
I'm here, please. Yes,
You could go back.